Welcome back, students. In this video lecture, we'll be discussing the topic correlation, and these are the contents that we are going to discuss. We will be discussing about the different types of correlation, the correlation coefficient, then different types of correlation coefficient, the limitations, and the applications. So previously in biostatistics, we have discussed the certain terms called as a mean, median, mode, then deviation, variable, etc. So in order to, or if you want to find the differences in the mean between the group, first of all we have to check whether it is a dependent variable or independent variable. And if it is an independent variable, and how much or how many of them are independent variable, whether the one or more than the one, it is independent variable. And if there are the more, it is two or more than two. And all these makes a differences in calculation of certain parameters in statistics. So if you want to find the differences or the relationship between the variables within the group or between the groups, we can use a certain type of test. For example, the t-test can be used, ANOVA can be used, correlation can be used, and regression analysis can be used. And in your syllabus, you have to just study about the correlation analysis. So in order to find out the differences or relationship between the variables, we use the correlation. For example, this children's IQ and the parents' IQ. These are the two parameters, isn't it? And if we want to find out is there any relationship between these two variables, we are able to do it by using correlation. Similarly, these are the other examples by which we can use. In these examples, we can use a correlation method, and we are able to find the relationship between these variables. So we will just pass on to what is correlation. The term correlation refers to the relationship between the two variables. And in the data analysis of the biological experiments, frequently it is desirable to know whether a relationship exists between the two variables. And these variables may be the dependent or independent. So when two variables are there and the two variables are moving, for example, x variable and there is a y variable, and these are the two variables and these two are moving together, then we say that these two variables are correlated. So when two variables move together, we say that they are correlated, such that a change in one variable result in the change in the other variable. And for example, when the height increases, the body weight also increases. When height increases, the body weight also increases. So this height and weight, we can say that these two parameters are correlated. And the correlation analysis helps us to know the nature, kind, and the strength of the relationship between the variables. So height and the weight, these are the two simple variables that are present in life. So this correlation coefficient, statistical index of the degree to which the two variables are associated or related. So in nature there are many variables, or we can say the infinite variables are there. We can name it as x, y in the simple terms, and this x can be height or weight, length or breadth, etc. And if these two variables are associated in some way, when one variable increases, the other variables increases, or vice versa, then we say that these two variables are related in some means, and we can determine this relationship between these two variables. Okay. We can determine whether the one variable is related to other by seeing whether the scores on the variables co-vary, whether they vary together, or if there is any relationship, we are able to find it out. So we can say that the correlation is one of the important statistical analysis method by which we are able to find the relationship between the two variables. The word correlation is made of the meanings together and the relation. These two terms are used together and we got the term correlation. And one of the best statistical tests is a correlation method. In order to find out the relationship between the variables, the correlation, it is the most important method that is used. And the correlation analysis shows us how to determine both the nature and the strength of the relationship between the two variables. Okay, so any matter which is varying, or any quantitative variable or qualitative variable which is varying, is called as a variable, and that those variables can be the relationship between these variables can be measured. And correlation, it is one of the method by which, or the most widely used method by which we are able to find the relationship between the variables. Within the variables also, between the variable also, we are able to find out the relationship. So the correlation, it is a linear relationship between the two variables. So correlation measures the linear association between the two variables, and this relationship between the two variables can be plotted graphically on an x and the y axis. Okay, and when the scores are marked correspondingly, the result is called as a scatter plot. So the x and the y parameters, if there are only the two variables, then we are able to plot the x and the y variables, and the values can be plotted in a graph, and this type of graph is called as a scatter plot. Here you can see the markings are scattered, and so as a result it is called as a scatter plot. So this is a neat picture of a scatter plot. These are the few other plots that is available, and this picture shows the magnitude of the correlation. Here you can see it is positively correlated. X and the y are the positively correlated, that is the x values. As the x values increases, the y values also increases. Here it is negatively correlated. This line comes down. So the x value and the y values are negatively correlated. So we are able to find out the relationship between the two variables. So furthermore, we can discuss on the different types of correlation. So on the basis of the degree of correlation, it is classified into positive correlation and negative correlation. Then on the basis of the number of variables, there is a simple correlation, there is a partial correlation, and there is a multiple correlation. And on the basis of the linearity, how linear the variables are correlated, there is a linear correlation and there is a non-linear correlation. So based upon the different aspects of correlation, there are the different types of correlation: positive, negative, simple, partial and multiple, linear and non-linear. Now let's see one by one the positive correlation. So when the two variables move in the same direction, when the two variables, that is a x and the y variable, moves in the same direction, that means when the x values increases, the y value also increases, or vice versa. When the x values decreases, the y value also decreases. So we can say that these two, x and y, variables are positively correlated. For example, the height and the weight. As the height increases, the weight also increases. The high values of x tend to be associated with the high values of y. As the x increases, the y also increases, and this type of correlation is called as a positive correlation. And if we plot a graph, it will be like this. It will be increasing like a straight line upwards, like this. X and this is the x-axis and this is a y-axis, and if we plot a positive correlation, the graph will be like this. And the next type, it is a negative correlation when the values of the two variable moves in the opposite direction. That is, if the x value increases and the y value decreases, then these two parameters, these x and the y parameters, are negatively correlated. That is, when one parameter, when one variable increases, the other variable decreases. So this type of correlation, we call it as a negative correlation. That is, the high values of x tend to associated with the low values of y. As the x increases, the y decreases. So this type of relation is called as a negative correlation. For example, the yield of the crop and the price. When the yield increases, the price decreases. That is, if we are getting a particular crop yield high, then the price of that particular product will decreases. So that is a negative type of correlation. Then there is another type, it is a no correlation. That is, no consistent tendency for the values of the y to increase or decrease as the x increases. So when the x value increases, there is neither a tendency to increase or to decrease for the y value. Then this type of correlation is called as a no correlation type. So we can't say that x and the y are correlated in any means. So this type of correlation is called as a no correlation. So this is a picture for a positive correlation, picture, the graphical representation of negative correlation. Then this is a comparative correlation. This is a zero correlation. That is a positive correlation, and this type of correlation is a perfect correlation. If you are getting the spot in a graph similar to that of a straight line, then it is a perfect correlation. It becomes a positive when all the spots are almost in the same line, and zero if it is scattered maximum, then we say that it is a zero correlation. We say that there is no relationship between the variables, and if it is going downwards, then it is called as a negative correlation. And if it is going down and we are getting a straight line, almost a straight line, if you are getting the spots in a straight line, then we call it as a perfect negative correlation. Then there is a term called as a correlation coefficient, and before going into the correlation coefficient, we will discuss about the method of studying correlation. The correlation between the two variables can be measured either by graphically, that is by plotting this type of graph by simple graphic method, that is the x and the y axis we will be plotting, and we will be just plotting the values of x and values of y, and we will be getting a straight line like this, or these type of scattered spots, and these diagrams are also called as a dot plots. So these are the type of graphical method by which the correlation is represented. So these are the graphical method. Either we can just get the dot graph, or we can just a pure graphical method. So these are the two types of graphical method. So that's all in this video lecture. In the coming video lecture, we'll be discussing about the algebraic method of correlation measurement. That's all in this video lecture. Thank you.